In a crumbling Detroit neighborhood, an old veteran named Calvin Brooks lived a life of quiet desperation. His only companion was Rio, a brilliant green parrot he rescued after a violent storm. Calvin's life had spiraled into poverty after he lost his job and health benefits. He barely had money for food, but he always made sure Rio ate. One night, as Calvin collapsed from hunger and despair, Rio made a silent vow. He flew out into the morning sky, determined to save his best friend. The first heist. Rio's first target was a bustling suburban mall. Perched on rafters, he observed people pulling out cash. Timing it perfectly, he swooped down on an unsuspecting woman's open purse and snatched 2 crisp $100 bills. He darted through the food court and vanished into the sky. That evening, Calvin woke up to find the money lying next to him. He was shocked, confused, but grateful. It was enough for food, rent, and his heart medication. He had no idea Rio was just getting started. The learning curve. Rio's missions became more calculated. He studied human behavior, learning which pockets bulged with wallets, which cashiers held stacks of bills. He hit marts, ATMs, and street vendors. Always fast, always invisible. Calvin began to ask questions, but Rio's innocent eyes gave nothing away. Calvin used the money to buy food for his neighbors and medicine for an elderly woman next door. People started whispering about a mysterious, green angel, helping the poor. The rich get robbed. Rio targeted only the wealthy, greedy businessmen, arrogant shoppers flaunting their wealth, and corrupt city officials who stashed cash in their coat pockets. A woman wearing a $12,000 handbag screamed when her purse was snatched by a parrot outside a luxury store. Rio never took more than needed, just enough to help the ones forgotten. Police labeled it random animal theft. Media laughed it off, but the streets knew better. Part 5. The Man in the Shelter. One rainy night, Calvin visited a homeless shelter to deliver food. There he met Jerome, a disabled father of 2 who hadn't eaten in days. Calvin gave him cash and promised more. That night, Rio flew farther than ever, to a casino. Slipping inside, he stole from a high roller's unattended poker winnings. The next day, Jerome had food, a coat for his daughter, and a bus pass for job interviews. Word spread. Someone out there was watching over the poor. Trouble in the sky. Rio's daring heists didn't go unnoticed. Surveillance footage from a mall finally caught a blurry image of the thief parrot. A local news channel aired the clip, calling it America's Smartest Bird Bandit. Animal Control launched an investigation. They didn't know who owned the bird, but a reward was announced. Calvin, seeing the news, began to panic. "Rio, they're onto you," he whispered. But Rio only ruffled his feathers and flew off again. Betrayal and capture. A jealous neighbor, seeing Calvin's improving condition, suspected something. When Rio returned one night with cash, the neighbor filmed it and anonymously sent it to the police. Days later, officers arrived with animal control vans. Rio was snatched in the night while Calvin slept. The house was raided. Calvin was heartbroken, screaming for his friend. Rio was locked in a cage at a facility, silent and still, refusing food. The city called him a criminal bird, but he had already become a legend. The streets rise. When the news of Rio's capture spread, the streets erupted. Poor families, shelter volunteers, and struggling single mothers rallied. They held up signs, "Free the hero bird." Videos of Rio feeding the hungry circulated online. The media shifted tone. Was the parrot a criminal, or a savior? Calvin appeared on local TV, cheerfully telling the story of how Rio saved not only his life, but many others. The nation watched. The courtroom decision. A small courtroom in Detroit filled with reporters, lawyers, and a trembling Calvin. The judge listened as Calvin recounted how Rio had brought money, hope, and dignity. Experts testified about the parrot's intelligence. Animal rights activists demanded his release. After hours of deliberation, the judge gave a final verdict. Rio would be freed and placed under Calvin's care under the condition that he retires. The courtroom burst into applause. Calvin collapsed in relief, crying as Rio was placed on his shoulder once more. The legend lives on. Rio never stole again, but his story spread across the country. A children's book was written about him. Calvin was offered a home, and donations poured in from people touched by the story. Rio spent his days perched on Calvin's porch, watching kids play and old folks smile. Sometimes, a wallet would go missing, only to be found later with extra bills tucked inside. People joked, maybe the parrot's not retired after all. But Calvin would just smile and whisper, he only steals for the broken hearts. The legend of the winged thief lived on, one green feather at a time.